Thank you for joining us. This is Live with Miami's Community News, and I'm Michael Mullen. Today we're going to be talking about mental health. We have two great guests, Dr. Rochelle Clarke, thank you very much for being here, and Dr. Dominique Leveille.
Yes.
Terrific. Both of you have your PhDs, one specific, both in licensed mental family therapists as well.
Yes.
These are great degrees, and you've been helping a lot of people. And recently, I came across your company, and it's called Bliss Therapy.
Yes, blisstherapy.me.
All right.
Yes.
It was interesting because it is all about me, all right? And when I see bliss, just the words, because words matter, all right? It's calming. It's like instantly. Could you tell us how you came up with that name?
I came up with the name because the idea of therapy, being in school, Dr. Clarke can attest, it was a lot of our professors was like, the hardest thing is getting the clients to make it to the office, because it's almost like therapy, the idea was similar to going to the dentist. It's like you don't want to go, but you know you need to go. So I wanted to create a business where that when you think of the name, it's already relaxing, it already is inviting, it already makes you feel comfortable. So that, and I figured everyone likes Bliss chocolates. Everyone loves the chocolate. So why not see therapy the same way, in a blissful way?
So in a medical setting, if you need to see the doctor, it's typically you're going to go once and 30% chance you're going to get better instantly, but we don't anticipate having you go back again and again and again and again.
Exactly.
But Dr. Clarke, but to get better, you have to have an awareness about yourself. So when a client goes to you and they start wondering about how long am I going to be here before I get better, what does that sound like in that conversation with you?
It sounds like there isn't a specific time, and as long as you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to be transparent, then we'll see where it takes us. Someone might come in with multiple different things they want to work on, and in my experience, working on one thing at a time and getting that one thing done gets them more excited and shows them that, oh, okay, I have reachable goals.
Wonderful. So right now it's holiday time. We have a couple things that are going on. Well, we have a lot of things that are going on in the world, all right?
Yes.
First of all, we have the holidays. Second, we just had the time change where there's a whole bunch of stuff that's connected to that. We just got done with a very interesting election. We have several wars that are going on, of which somehow we're all connected to that one way or another, either through the family or immediate, and highly emotional issues with all those things. So it's a time for a lot of people get anxious around this time.
Yes. Yes.
So what do we do as human beings to have all this stuff and be able to sort of set them aside?
I think it's important for us to kind of look at what's in front of us right now. Like, I know there's a lot going on in the world that if we were to sit down and think about can become extremely overwhelming, but we still have our daily lives to think of. The holidays sometimes put this extra pressure and anxiety of needing to be perfect or wanting to get the best or looking a certain way. So I like to remind my clients to just be in the present and see each thing one at a time and reminding ourselves of control. We can't control it all. So let's stop trying our minds to make us control it. Try to just focus on one thing.
And Dr. Clarke, so here we are. We are almost 5 years out from the beginning of COVID. But it's not over, is it?
No, it isn't.
Tell us about the effect that it had and currently is having on people.
Yeah, so in my experience, during COVID, it was a time where people isolated. And so in the initial, it was, I got a time to just be by myself and do different things. After that, it was almost like a seclusion. And so people tried to use electronic devices in an effort to really connect. Now what we're finding is, although people are going back into the workplace and school settings are back in person, people are still having a very difficult time adjusting. And at different stages throughout the life cycle, depending on when, what stage you were at during the pandemic, and now all of those things are having different implications on how someone connects with people. So there are people who've just entered into like college in the last 4 to 5 years. They didn't have a graduation from high school. That's momentous in our society. They also didn't have that transition to go away to school. And so they're adapting now. How do I make friends? Who am I as an adult? What does that look like? Some people transitioned from their 20s to their 30s, 30s to 40s, 60s to 80s. These are big decades that normally we had celebration about, and they don't have that. So there's a feeling of a loss of that ability to have celebrated or memorialized certain things.
And we know, Doctor, that people responded to COVID and all everybody's a little bit different.
Yes, everyone responded differently, because if you are already distant from your family, meaning let's say you had just gone off to college and it was your first year away from home, you were trying to adjust to that, and then now because at first everyone tried to just separate, keep distance, and then everything went to shutdown mode. So it's almost like if you went off to college, it's almost like you feel like you weren't successful, like you didn't accomplish because you had to come back home, even though it's not because you did something wrong, but it still feels like a punishment because that wasn't the plan. So everyone who kind of had plans that were changed feels like a form of like disappointment of like, oh, I didn't accomplish it. So am I really good at this? So there was a lot of internal questioning that was happening during and after.
So we know that electronics at 5 years is like a lifetime. So we know that, especially in this arena, we are sort of stuck in this electronic world, right? And there's lots of good things and lots of things that aren't. And I do want to give a shout out to Michael Phelps, who 4 or 5 years ago, when he got on TV, he said, with one of his electronics, I might add, and say, when I need help, I dial up my doctor. So on one hand, it was really good, but let's talk about what it's doing to each of us, with not just with the phones, with the games that we are playing and the catch up that we're trying to do. So let's talk about
Something that Dr. Clarke and I have noticed is that it's creating a lot of separation, because during the pandemic, everyone kind of had to create a bubble, and technology was what helped us to create the bubble. We were told not to touch each other, but we could talk on our phones. So everyone kind of created that community. And when we got out of the pandemic, everyone lost the value of family game night. They lost the value of we can actually talk to each other without being on a device. So we've noticed that it creates a lot of separation in families. Everyone's on their device separately doing something, but not together.
And the separation, that is a real thing, all right? Because we were not required to close. So we had essentially shower curtains between people. Wow. That separation. Here we had at least one glass thing there, and we'd have another one here. So those are real separations, all right? And that just went on to the next step. I think I shared with you before. I had a pedicure back during the pandemic. My wife was so upset at me that she locked me out of the house. Literally locked me out of the house because she didn't know what to do.
Right.
And it was like, and I thought everybody was like me. I'm used to, I was dealing with everybody, we all were, but everybody responded differently. Yes. And so in today's environment now, when people are trying to come out of their shell, and although those people frequently say, well, there's nothing to it, but there is something to it. It's in the back of their heads. So when you talk with patients, what is it, some of the things that they tell you as far as their struggle to come forth and be free as much as they can from the pandemic, and how not to stay on their machines as long?
It's learning how to communicate all over again. It's learning that technology has created a community within itself. So yes, it can connect us as it did during the pandemic. It can also be really helpful to people who are by themselves and need that sense of togetherness and belonging. But knowing when the right time is to use the devices is important. So when families come in and they're having a difficult time because people aren't communicating effectively, I might say, what would it be like if for just a second or two you timed yourself and just no devices? What might that look like? I don't know. What would that look like? I don't know. Do you think you can try that? And let's just see what happens. And so that's different for each person, what that looks like.
So in our household, we try to, when you come to the house for dinner, leave your phones over here. And I watch them and myself one at a time. Excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom.
Check the phone.
And take the phone. And so we realized that it is not just fun, it is an addiction of sorts, or maybe not of just of sorts, that we have to be connected. So why don't you tell us what happens to our brain when we're on our phone and we're going like
Just
this,
scrolling.
right? Scrolling and scrolling. What's going on in our psyche?
I think, and Dr. Clarke can also attest to this as well, I think a lot of it is we're self-soothing. We're giving ourselves to stimulate the conversations, the love, the attention that we would have been receiving outward. We're kind of giving it to ourselves in this device. Wouldn't you say?
So there's like an instant gratification that comes along with that. And so it's occupying a space that otherwise we would have been able just to center and just be.
Did we wind up being afraid that if we don't do this, we're not going to be able to communicate on the other end because we're spending so much time over here?
I think there's a fear of being left out because our phones have become our excitement, the way we know what everyone is doing. It is, for some people, how they stay very much connected with the world. So it's almost like, am I missing out on something? Is someone reaching out to me and I haven't replied back? So it's like the fear of being left out, the fear of not being a part, even though the phone is stopping you from being a part of what's actually happening in reality in your time.
So, but it's truthful that you are being left out because you're not answering the phone or you're not looking at it. So how do we go through our lives and say, I'm going to put this down and, I'm just not going to pay any attention to here, all right? And I'm going to address it later. What's the self-talk like?
The self-talk is, all right, I'm going to allow myself to be on my device. And then I'm going to allow myself, let's say at 1 o'clock today, to come off of my device for 2 minutes and just see what happens then. And then let me practice this again. Maybe at 5 o'clock, I'll come off for maybe 5 minutes and see what that's like. But it's giving yourself the opportunity to come off on your terms and whatever that is.
That's real. And when you speak, I hear your truth in there. Because how about somebody that answers their phone and they say, hey, I'm in a meeting, I'll call you back. So I always wondered, so why are you answering it? What am I going to miss out on? Why are you saying, I'll call you back?
Exactly.
What is it that goes through our brains? And I include all of us in that, all right?
It's the fear of missing out on the person not calling you the next time they need you because they decide to call someone else. It's the fear of, will that person think that I intentionally sent them to voicemail? Like I know with the phone, there's if you click the side of the phone, it'll say, oh, you've been forwarded to the voice message. A lot of people are like, no, don't click the side of the phone. They'll know I sent them to voicemail. That's okay. You're busy.
Some people think that this is all by accident. We know it's not by accident. The people that are really smart figure out how to trigger that in our brains. And there have been many shows that have been on how the big business keeps us there. Yeah. And one day the rest of the story will be told, similar to what happened with cigarettes. You might remember when the big story was 60 Minutes or 48 Hours 30 years ago. They didn't do the show because there was so much pressure on not to do the show about the addiction quality of cigarettes. So you've been in practice for a while now.
Yes.
So tell me, how has your practice and how you talk with people changed because of your experiences?
I think I give them real life experiences. I when I'm working with couples, I also try to think of my marriage as well. Am I giving them boundaries or expectations that would even work in my type of family as well? So it's saying in their reality, and also like Dr. Clarke said, not pushing them to feel like they have to make this change. It's more of okay, this is a problem. You have this solution or this solution. You choose what works best for you in your life. When you give it to people that way, it makes them feel like, oh, I'm choosing. So, okay, Dr. Leveille, I'm going to do this. I'm like, okay, that sounds wonderful. And so it's not forced upon them. It's more of a gentle reminder of a difference. That's what I like to call it.
Wouldn't it be great if we could just do that ourselves in our marriages?
Right. That'd be amazing.
That would be amazing.
So, can we talk a little bit about what occurs to us when we have big losses, whether it's a death or moving or losing a job? Dr. Clarke, talk about what happens to our psyche when those things occur.
So loss in general has so many different physiological aspects. So something major has happened, we're trying to process it from a psychological stance, and then you'll notice you'll have symptoms that might present itself in the body. It might be a headache, it might be racing the chest, it might be stomach pain, could be lower back pain. So there's so many somatic issues that occur when someone is experiencing something that is significant. In my experience, when it's a loss due to a death, there's a way of trying to cope in a world that continues to go on. I don't know if you've experienced a death and you leave, right? And you go and you get in the car and the world is continuing, but your loved one just died. And it's like you want to yell to everyone like this, someone major or someone significant is not here, and life goes on. So there's like a psychological connection or disconnect that occurs in the initial. So how do we start to process going through life without this person who is significant to us? So there's a lot of things that happens with that. It's a constant like pinching. Is this real? Till you get to the point where it is. And then there's lots of stages that, you know, someone can go through. And then there's the non-death loss. There's adjusting to a world after COVID, and we're not talking about it. So that kind of ambiguous loss, like, oh my goodness, I don't feel like I felt before, but I should feel like I felt before, and no one is saying anything, so I don't want to say anything, and so I'm suffering in silence with feelings of insecurity, feelings of sadness, feelings of anxiety, fear, isolation, and not knowing who to kind of process that with.
And we know as we get older, we have our own losses, physical losses. Some people lose the ability to do certain things. Some people lose extremities. And all that is real.
Yes, that's very real.
And so how is it that somebody that's had a loss that is not apparent to somebody else, right? How do you like broach the subject and say, listen, I just lost 2 fingers and I was born with 10 and now I only have 8 and I'm suffering from that. That loss is pretty significant.
Yes. And a lot of times what people have to do is move past what you may think, how others may see it. A loss is a loss. Like you said, losing 2 fingers, that's major, you know? So it's looking at it as it is a big thing, even if the rest of the world doesn't identify it. Sometimes allowing someone to just verbalize, this is a loss of mine, that hurts me. Sometimes that's all they need. They don't need everyone to say, oh, we're so sorry for your loss, but they're just looking for the certain people closest to them. So it's teaching the client how to communicate to their closest family members about this loss, and not in the physical sense of, okay, it's 2 fingers. It's more of like, no, this is what I'm no longer doing because I don't have this. So it is something that I'm mourning and I'm learning to adjust to.
And, you know, just to piggyback off of what you said, it's so important for us to honor what the person is saying and to meet them where they are in whatever their grief journey is. So when the person comes and they don't have the 2 fingers, gosh, I can't even imagine what that's like. Yeah. Tell me for a moment, when you first found out, like, walk me through that process. You want them to kind of tell their story as well, because no one else is asking those difficult, you know, questions. Like, what was it like when you found out? What was it like when you first looked at it? What was it like when you tried to grab something and you realized they were gone?
And sometimes people are waiting for that moment to open up and just like put it out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's been times I've asked a client a question and they're like, wow, I've waited so long for someone to ask me that. Or they'll come in and I'll say, how was your day? Good. And I'll say, how was it? And then you get tears, or you get laughing, or that's when you truly get, because we always carry the I'm okay with us 24 hours. You know?
And let's talk about, if we could, when people have lost a family member and you know about it. So often it's really uncomfortable to say whatever it is. And I see people on social media and you read it, and 95% of it's the same thing. And it seems just so repetitive and seems to be artificial. And you go, well, what are you supposed to do? And so for the person like myself, it's like, I don't know, which line am I going to use? And I don't mean that in a degrading way, but like, what am I going to say to this person who lost somebody that's really important? So what can we do to process our own stuff, our own fear of loss, to be able to ask that person or to tell them that we're sorry, all right, or whatever it is? What are some options for us?
I think we like to say we're sorry, right? But a lot of times it's not our fault. So we are apologizing for something that's out of our hands. Truly, just think about it in the sense of how comforting you can be to just say, I can imagine the pain that you're going through right now. I'm here. You know, just letting the person know. I know when I lost my brother, just knowing I had people there was enough, even if they didn't communicate, even if they didn't say something to me, but they were standing next to me. They were present, you know? Dr. Clarke, for you?
Yeah, I think people forget that silence is a huge form of communication. And especially when someone is going through like a loss. So just saying nothing and just being by the person's side can be extremely helpful. Or sending something to them. You know, oftentimes people get inundated or they get lost in their own thoughts. I often tell people that I don't go around someone in the initial. I wait a month and a half when everyone else is gone. And then I'll say, you know what, let's go to lunch or let's go to breakfast, or I'll just send them something. Just to let them know I haven't forgotten and you're not alone.
When I was very young, I had a loss, and I remember it was a long time ago. Michael, time will heal it. Oh, even today I'm thinking about it. I go, I know he was trying to say something good.
Yes.
But it's like, here it is, and it's just like I'm still bubbling, you know, with that. And you realize that, to your point, sometimes it's just being there.
Yes.
And without saying, as you're saying, I didn't do anything wrong, all right? So I'm not sorry per se, because we sort of do that. We sort of mix that up.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Sorry is when you've done something
wrong.
Right. So frequently when families are moving along with their in their lives, is the young people go off to college or boarding school, whatever it is. So you have a family unit, 4 people or 5 people. Maybe there's a mother that maybe they're still married and everything, and all of a sudden Johnny Senior's off, all right? So you got the 12th grader and you got the 8th grader. All of a sudden the 8th grader's going, what happened to my best friend? It's Dr. Clarke.
Yeah.
How do we process this?
Wow, that is significant. And that's one of those losses that are called, you know, it's one of those losses that people don't talk about, right? So you're grieving. Yes, the child went on to school and the child is in a new environment. So your household looks different. There aren't 4 people at the dining table anymore. There are 3. And now this child who could have had a distractor, right? An older sibling, all eyes are on them. They're like the only child. And now the parents understand, oh my goodness, we only have a couple more years. They're going to leave too. And so there might be some smothering that happens. And then the person who's gone off, we're forgetting that, oh my gosh, they're adjusting to a new environment, to new friends, to you know, a new curriculum.
And maybe lots of anxiety to boot.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And more than normalizing it to the point where you say something like, yeah, we all do that. Everybody's gone through that. Because that really minimizes someone's experience. Yeah. Join them where they are. Man, how are you coping? Like, I can't even imagine. What is it like now that they're gone? And the couple they're reconnecting too, right? Sometimes we get inundated with parenting, and then the child leaves. I know when my son left the house, my husband and I were like, oh, we're so glad.
Is that you?
Right, we're so glad we actually took time to have like date nights, so like we know who the other person is. But even adjusting without having the noise or the distraction of a child in the house, it was an adjustment. I'm like, gosh, it's really quiet.
When my son went off to school, he said, I'm going to come, I'm flying in. I was really happy. I'd pick him up at the airport. By the time I got out of the airport, I was already sad. He arrived, that means he's leaving.
Yeah.
It was like, wow. So I had this minute and a half of, I went, goodness gracious. Yeah. And of course that spreads the whole family family unit there. And we know lots of times for the young man, woman that's going off, there are a lot of stresses. We know that lots of times that's when a lot of challenges occur, and we see that with people's mental health. If somebody's having a issue where they're concerned about their anxiety, what can we suggest they do on an urgent level? What should they do?
I think if you're worried about your anxiety, it's probably time to speak to someone, because as humans, like when we're going about our day, we kind of just function. And when something is really bothering us, if you notice your mind keeps saying, I think I need to deal with this anxiety, I think I'm having an issue with anxiety, you may want to just speak to a therapist. And that's something that you can do, in various ways. There's different, you can start with your primary doctor, maybe talk to them about your anxiety, but speaking to someone about it that's not a family member, that's maybe in the medical field, that can maybe give you some advice or recommendations.
I've spent many years in this arena, right, as on this side of the table. But for somebody that has never done that, how do they move from, I think I'm having a problem, to I need to go get help?
Whenever
it must be tough for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I don't know. I was raised where children are seen and not heard, and what happens in this house stays in this house. So I remember when I was going to go to school to do this, my parents were like, someone's going to come and talk to you. They're going to tell you what happens in the house. And so I always remember that and how difficult it was for my own family to adjust. And so for anyone that's having a difficult time, I would just say it's almost like you go to a store or you're sitting in an airplane and someone sits next to you. Sometimes you just feel the need to talk to someone and you spark a conversation. I would look at it from that perspective. You're going into a setting. It's a contained setting, just like an airplane, and you're going to sit next to someone, and you're just going to talk, and you're going to see what happens.
Yeah. So often we and there are a lot of exercises that I've done with that. We say something, and then we realize that's really not what I said, but it's not what I meant. And that whole conversation can go, and in the case that I've been involved with, it came down to, do you love me? Do you care for me? Are we good? All right. Do we care for each other?
Yes.
Is this working?
Yes.
And so often when we get anxious, we need to get secure and figure out how to help ourselves.
And those moments that we're feeling like the anxiety is taking over us is because we're trying to control something that maybe we can't, or the anxiety is trying to control us, and we need to just ground ourselves.
Right. Let's talk about Thanksgiving. We know that that's when a lot of families get together. There are 1,000 jokes about it, all right? Please don't feed your dogs the food, all right? It's a busy day for the vets and the plumbers. But putting that aside, so often we got that family gets together, and you got crazy Uncle Joe that's over there, and you have the squabbling about whatever it is. So for the person that's a little anxious, that can really exaggerate that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and so for me, you gave me some great advice before I got in here. Just breathe, okay? And rather than say, oh my gosh, I have to deal with this uncle again, or acknowledge it. Yes, Uncle so-and-so is going to say something that's inappropriate. Aunt so-and-so is going to complain about this. My mom, my dad, acknowledge the things that irritate you, and then allow yourself at the dinner table this year, when it happens, to say, check, I knew it, and see what happens. That might change your entire perspective.
We know frequently with so many digital electronic changes going on, you'd be standing or sitting at your computer and you can't figure it out. I can't tell you how many times I just go, ugh, all right? And it's like, it got me, all right? And I've learned to accept, yeah, you can't figure this out. Go find somebody else that can help you get that done. And Rachel's over there going, yeah, I think I've heard him a couple of times over there. So, and so often with all these changes that are going digitally, people have lost that connection, and they're seeking, on how to do better. So let's talk about the little kids that are on their phones this big. We see it all the time, right? So suggestions for mom and dad and their family about digital equipment, phones, iPads.
I know with my little one, we have a parent control on the iPad where it's on for a certain amount of time, and then the screen just goes dark and tells him that he's run out of time. So we kind of limit how much time he's spending on each of his apps. That's something that we do. We try Monday through Friday to not have any screen time, where it's just like us time, and then on the weekends he gets it. But it's more of like finding the schedule that works with your family, and also reminding ourselves that they need to play and socialize with others that's not on the electronic.
When my son was about this big, he wouldn't go out and play. He was when the computer's this big. I got so frustrated. I just took the whole computer, I threw it on the ground. We wind up at a therapist, and he says, no, that's his place where he goes. But the playing stuff had already stopped at that point. They would take their computers, they would actually, that was in the old days, they would sit across from each other and play games. I go, what kind of world is this? Don't you get on your bike and go to, no, Dad, that's gone. Who knew we'd be making his living, years later doing that. But for the parents wondering about how to interact and how to keep their kids happy, we're not quite sure what to do. Yes. So what do we do as parents in trying to navigate their growth and their desire to stay current. What do we do?
For me, it's important for you to have that time. Allocation of time is important so that there is that balance. And then I would tell the parents to find different activities or games that they can all use on the devices. So I know that during the holiday season, there's these things you can use on your phone, and it's almost like, it has like the name of something and you have to act it out, kind of like charades, but on the phone. Use the device so that it's not always, the children are not always thinking you're against the device.
Sometimes we'll do family game night, and instead of doing a board game, we'll do it on the Nintendo Switch where we're all playing like a Mario game together. So it still brings us together into their world, because one thing parents must remember to do is enter their child's world, because you want to be also their friend. So even though I don't know what I'm doing and I always lose, I still show up and I still try to play just to see what it's like to be them, just to be a kid again in their world.
So take a grandson over to Target, and we go on the weekends, and I give him a $25 limit. So he's pricing out the stuff, and he goes, I see him, he's looking at something that was $40. He's, Grandpa, did I get $25? And I said, yes, sir. He looks at one, he's pointing to it. Grandpa, can I get an advance on next week?
I love that.
I go, you must be talking to your father, for God's sake. So one of the things...
I love that about them.
It was really
So
great. I'm very proud of him to be able to be bold enough to say that. So often we have mentors and people that have helped us along our journey. I'm going to ask Dr. Clarke, if you could look over in this camera over here, the blue one right there, Rochelle's getting, okay. And then tell us about some of the mentors you've had. If you want to mention by name, that would be great. If they're here or they've already passed, that's fine. Because there's some little girl that's looking at you thinking, I want to be like her, but I want to know that she's real. So look right in that camera. There you go. You're on.
Okay, so
and you're next.
So of course my mom is a big mentor for me. She went back to college when I was a teenager, despite my dad not really wanting her to do that. And so I thought that was pretty awesome. In terms of going back to school, I went back in my 30s, and so Dr. Tommy Boyd is very instrumental for me. There's also a gentleman by the name of Alan Leveille that's a mentor for me, in terms of really trying to follow what my destiny is, and someone who's passed. His name is Rabbi Ira, and he was significant to me in terms of like my overall spiritual journey.
Wonderful.
Okay, wow. You know how to end the show. So for me, definitely my mom, absolutely my mom. She is the foundation that guides me daily. So definitely my mom, my dad, my boys. My boys, and I include my husband in my boys because it's the four of us, that kind of sticks it out through each day. And of course, my friends, my close friends, my cousins. Thank you all for just being supportive in there and listening to my stories when I need them.
So, Doctor, thank you very much for being here. And for you as well.
Thank you.
Congratulations. People want to find out more about you. They can go to blisstherapy.me.
.me, exactly, because therapy is all about me, about self. So blisstherapy.me if you need to get a hold of me. And then for Dr. Clarke, your information.
Yeah, you can just reach out. I'm either on Nova Southeastern University's website or newleafstrategy.com.
And why might you be there?
Why might you be there? Oh, because I'm a professor there.
Oh, okay. And you happened to mention a rabbi. I was fortunate to be able to be talking with Manis Friedman, who's the #1 YouTube rabbi. Sat right here. So I said, Rabbi, I had a moment of intimacy with my wife. I want to know how I can have more. And then he said, Michael, remember, it's all about them. And as well as this. Ladies, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And Rochelle, thank you very much for producing the show again, folks.